So I'm working on making my Sigma 30mm f1.4 DCDN review video. This has taken me a lot of time and effort, and it's something that has been a passion project that I'm also very uncertain about, because I want to do it justice, and I don't want my words alone to be the only thing supporting that. One of the things that I'm doing right now that I haven't done is film in S-Log3. Primarily, what I do when I'm working on any video project for YouTube in particular is shoot in picture profile 1, which I have configured to be the still picture profile with the still color gamut. I've increased by +1 all of the colors individually, and I've boosted saturation by 2 or 3. So now you should be seeing basically the image that the color, if you will, that I capture on average out of this camera. So what I do to edit the color in the picture profile is I go into what is for me my picture profile 1. And you can see the gamma here is set to still, just as the color mode is. I have my saturation set to +3. And if we go to color depth, you'll find that R, G, B, C, M, and Y are all at +1. I find that gives me a slightly more saturated look that I like. It's one that allows me to get the image that I want in camera, as opposed to having to make that image in post after having shot something like S-Log2 or S-Log3. This gives me an image that is as close as possible to the image that I get out of my Canon. I did that because I love Canon's color science, and I feel like I can consistently use the image that I'm getting out of my Canon 6D without having to do too much work in post. As long as I get the white balance correct, as long as I get the exposure correct, I can just use it. Now I'm filming this in S-Log3 so that hopefully I can show you a little tutorial on how I choose to grade S-Log3, because I feel like I grade it not necessarily differently, but with a greater eye for efficiency perhaps than a lot of other people who shoot in logarithmic profiles. So as you can see, this image is shot in S-Log3, and I have not edited it. I have not graded it, so I'm going to do that now. One of the things that I've kind of fallen off the boat on doing that is really good to do is to use this curve. And there's a lot of different ways you can use it, but I find that I want to drop the shadows and bump the highlights. Creative is not something I use very frequently because my focus is predominantly on being as quick as I possibly can. From here, one of the first things I'll do is boost contrast and saturation, and then I will get my exposure to be just about what I want it to be, which is right about there. And from there I will add in a little bit of highlights and whites and drop a little bit the shadows and the blacks. And so there's about the image that I want. That maintains a lot of the skin tone, it gets a lot of the color in the sombrero, and you're able to see faithfully reproduced the colors, this red of the target for the goal and the green of the turf. A big part of my process in my workflow is just sitting down here, and I have an idea, I've done some research, I've used a product, or I've thought a lot about a product, and I talk at the camera. Typically, what happens is I go through several takes before I end up with something that I'm rather fond of, and that's typically the only one that I bring into the project in Premiere. Now, because I have done my little monologue a couple of times over, and because I've got the color right in the camera, oftentimes I can just go straight into editing, taking out the ums and the long pauses in order to make the video more fluid, somewhat ironically, because those chops make it a little less fluid, but it also makes it more watchable. So that's kind of the overall breakdown of my workflow. Sometimes it kind of depends. Sometimes in the process of cutting it all down, I'll just watch it a couple of times over, and sometimes I'll just watch afterwards. When I watch all the way through, I end up catching more things that need to be taken out the first time through, and so my process is a little bit more efficient, which I think all of us enjoy that. It means that I don't have to spend as much time working on that particular video, and that's really important to me because then I can spend more time with my partner or on other things that I'm interested in. So what I'm kind of getting at is that a lot of my workflow is intended to be such that it ultimately takes the least amount of time to go from beginning to end. One of the things that I do in that vein is I shoot almost entirely in 1080 because I know I'm going to export in 1080, and if I shoot in 4K on the 6300, then I have to go in and manually adjust every clip to be 50% of its normal size, and then the export takes longer and all this. So that's why I'm kind of shooting in 1080 on a regular basis nowadays. And from there, you have everything else squared away, you take it right into Premiere, you watch it through, you're cutting it while you're watching it, and then you have ultimately the final video product. Frequently, I will go back in after that and like I said previously, watch it through, only this time I'm not watching for things that I need to cut out. I'll be watching it to see, okay, do I need to put in a title with a little asterisk correcting myself or adding another piece of information? Do I want to add other images or other B-roll in there somewhere just to kind of spice it up? Do I want to cut between cameras? That's kind of an integral part of my workflow as well, because just having me sitting here talking to you is not quite as interesting as me sitting here talking to you with text overlaid, with images overlaid, with cuts. What I've neglected to mention throughout this is audio levels, is audio engineering of any kind. And that's because it's very specific for my rig and my setup and what I'm doing. On my setup, I have my Alpha 6300 set to an internal mic an internal mic volume of 4, and my Rode Video Mic Pro sitting atop it at plus 20 decibel gain. From there, when I'm in Premiere, I have to boost those audio signals by around plus 5 decibels per file on average. And then what happens when I bring in audio from, for example, SoundCloud that is Creative Commons 0 in order to be able to use it without copyright infringement, that tends to need to come down by 5 when I want to put it at the end of the video to maintain constant volume. When I'm putting it like underneath, if you will, it's literally underneath in Premiere, but when that's just another layer of the sound experience that you're having during the video, I typically take that down by 15 decibels. So it kind of depends on the sound, the decibel level of the sound that you're bringing in to Premiere and that you're capturing in camera, as well as what you're bringing in from your downloads folder wherever you have Creative Commons 0 music that you have downloaded. On my 6D, I tend to have that internal mic volume at like 3 or 5. And then I also have the Rode Video Mic Pro at plus 20 decibels gain. That tends to give me the sound that I want, that is close enough to what it should be, in my opinion, in order to take it to, in order to make it sound best. What I find is that oftentimes when I push it too far, there's a hiss that really bothers me. And so that's why I've actually stopped using my Canon, is because it feels like that hiss is substantially more pronounced on the one hand, and on the other, it doesn't seem to capture sound as consistently as my Alpha 6300. Finally, once I've gone through, I've added my titles, I've added the pictures, I've added transitions, I've cut everything down, everything sounds good, it's smooth. What I do is I export. And so I don't go through any, fancy rigmarole. I've made a little custom preset in Premiere, and it basically comes down to 1080p at 24 frames per second or 23.97 or whatever it is frames per second at a constant bit rate of 40 megabits per second, I believe it is. And oftentimes I'll adjust that down to 30 if I want a faster export or a smaller file size. Right now, I'm not able to super duper see a difference between the 30 and the 40 megabits per second on that constant bitrate. In the past, what I've done is done variable bitrate 1 pass, variable bitrate 2 pass, and that didn't ever make me feel like I was getting the same level of quality out of it. And so that constant bitrate is an assurance for me that the same quality will be there throughout. Thank you very much for your time and for your attention in watching this video. I really hope that you've learned something through this. I've kind of walked you through the way that I color grade inside my camera, the way that I color grade in Premiere, as well as trying to just kind of walk you through my workflow. I've gotten a number of requests for that, and so I really hope I've delivered value through creating this piece of content. If you enjoyed it, if it did provide value, please don't hesitate to smash that like button. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you have any comments on my workflow, on your workflow, on how I can learn from yours, how we can learn together and grow together, please don't hesitate to leave that comment below, because that's a great way for me to learn from you. So thank you very much for your time and for your attention, and I'll see you in the next one.